Well, Patrick Bollock is my name, and I'm a lecturer in veterinary surgery in the University of Glasgow at the moment. But my interest in marine mammals, I suppose, goes back to sort of a childhood in Argyll in the west of Scotland, where there were a huge number of, I suppose, grey and common seals. And I got involved after my veterinary degree in wildlife rehabilitation and a bit of work with seals, and then came to Ireland and was adopted by the Irish Seal Sanctuary, I suppose, for want of a better way of putting it, and got sort of deeply involved in some early kind of veterinary work and veterinary surgery on marine mammals. We were really just looking at the different types of injuries and pathology that we were seeing in rehabilitated, rescued young seals that came from the coastline of Ireland, and in fact further afield sometimes. And a lot of it was just post-mortems of animals that died or were presented dead, and so there was a great database sort of built up of that, which probably informed some of the early treatments then. And then we started to get into wounds, animals with eye problems, and we probably got adventurous, for want of another way of putting it, and we were able to perform some of probably the first surgical procedures that had ever really been performed on marine mammals around these islands. And the first one, the one that springs to mind, was a grey seal with a very severe infection and osteomyelitis in its one of its flippers. And we just didn't really know whether we could anaesthetize this animal and also deal with this pretty severe infection. So we did a partial amputation, and I was involved in that with a former colleague, Martin Weaver, who sadly is no longer with us. But it was a great success, and the animal was rehabilitated, put on weight, and there was a great fanfare when it came time to release. And I suppose for me, one of the sort of great things about the background to the work that was done here in Ireland is that there was following of these animals. There were either local reports or people spent time to see whether we didn't really know whether it was worthwhile rehabilitating these animals. We didn't know, did 25% survive, 10% survive, none survive. But in fact, we got data on that, and we were then able to present that nationally and internationally, and even publish some of that work, which I think for me the idea of wildlife rehabilitation has got to be backed up by evidence, evidence-based, conservation. That's the future, really. So one of the, I suppose, most interesting things is the range of pathology that we, associated with these rehabilitated seals. Eye injuries, very common with these big, frontally positioned eyes, which are very subject to trauma and injury, but also infections, probably secondary to wounds, things like osteomyelitis, which is an infection in the bone where the bacteria get down into the joint or into the bone itself, usually secondary to a wound, and then start to cause destruction and death, necrosis of the bone. And really the only way to deal with that is to actually go in and remove the infected bone in its entirety. And as I said, we didn't really know whether you could do that and expect an animal to survive in the wild, but fortunately we found out that yes, you could, and we were able to follow some of these animals. There was some tracking done, and that provided some evidence, and I'd like to think a platform for others. And since then a lot more work has been performed by our colleagues in UCD on the back of the original post-mortem work and then the surgery work. So it's very positive. I think it's a great legacy. I think it's fair to say that the grey seal has a big part in sort of Scottish culture and mythology, and I think you've got to remember that although for us in Scotland the grey seal is actually quite a common marine mammal, you can expect to see them around Scotland's coastline. It's actually in the world quite a rare animal. There aren't that many grey seals around, and I think, as I understand it, we have about 40% of the population of in the world around the Scottish coastline, which is fantastic. And I think if you look at Scottish poetry and story and myth and legend, the grey seal and the seal man, the silky in the Western Isles and the Hebrides is a great part of. I would, as a child, would have sung songs and been told stories about that kind of thing, and I think probably there is a love for the animal to some extent. I suppose in 1914, there was no legislative body in Scotland. It was, Westminster. It was we were completely, I suppose, controlled from London. So it was probably brave Scottish MPs, of which there weren't very many, who decided that they were going to, push for this act to preserve to look after the grey seal. I think they had maybe not altogether noble ideas in mind. They wanted to be able to shoot these animals, and it seemed like a good idea to preserve their numbers during the breeding season. But could you say that the grey seal was a talisman for conservation? Because it's been a great success. Grey seal numbers are at a record high. I think they're over potentially at 150,000 animals, perhaps even more. From an estimated low of, they reckon between 500 and 1,000, didn't they, in 1914? I mean, I don't think the numbers were probably very, critically assessed, but I think it was an altogether positive move and a conservation success. The world of veterinary medicine and biology has come together, and we've got a myriad of people who have great experience, great interest, and they're driving conservation forwards. And my ambition, I suppose, for the future is that that'll continue and grow, and we'll have this a world view of conservation which is a positive one.